Hi, I'm Charles with Annicap. The story begins as a man explains that he has died and thinks he was reincarnated as a young girl. This isn't the case though, and he reveals that he was actually reincarnated as a sword. He recalls how he had died after being hit by a car as a human and woke up in another world as a sword. A mysterious voice tells him to prepare for a rough life ahead, and the sword comforts himself by remembering how these reincarnation tropes often come with broken skills. A self-check reveals that he is an intelligent weapon and has pretty good skills including telekinesis. Goblins appear to attempt to take him, but they can't and only spit on the sword. In retaliation, the sword uses telekinesis to wield himself and brutally eliminates them all. After doing so, he realizes that he is able to take the skills of those he defeats and earns crystals as well. Further testing reveals that cutting through the crystals of his enemies are what get him the skills. He feels a bit lonely without a wielder though, and plans to level himself up for when someone comes along to claim him. Elsewhere, a young girl named Fran is treated poorly and states that she will become stronger. Later, our sword explains that using telekinesis drains his magic power, and he can only control himself for 3 minutes. He would eventually acquire magic draining abilities along with a floating ability that would allow him to go for longer. Defeating more enemies eventually results in him leveling up and earning upgrades for his skills. He continues his rampage after finding a goblin lair and destroys the Goblin King's head easily since no one expects a sword to fly on its own. His skills are growing rapidly and he excitedly anticipates eventually finding a wielder. Elsewhere, Fran attempts to rescue another slave, but can't as the necklace she wears forces her to obey orders. She continues to be taunted the next day, and further attempts at retaliation are stopped as well. Fran is undeterred though and promised to get stronger still. Later, the sword explains that the further away he moves from his pedestal, the stronger the monsters become. The stronger the monster, the more crystals and skills he earns. Things have gotten too easy, so the sword sets his sights on the Slime Lord in Area 5. The Slime Lord is not to be toyed with though, and the sword decides to use the strongest attack in his arsenal, Heavenly Slash. The aftermath is devastating and he realizes that he must get stronger to protect his future wielder. He earns the instant regeneration skill though and tests out a personal item storage skill. The sword then goes on to defeat several other bosses using a combination of his new skills and clever tactics. Things have gotten too easy in Area 5 now as well, so he decides it's time to head out to uncharted lands. When he does, the sword stops to evaluate but realizes that he cannot move. All the skills he tries to use just get absorbed into the ground. 3 days go by and he begins to hope that a beautiful elf comes to rescue him. However, 10 days go by and he wishes for anyone to come save him. A full month would then pass and the sword now hopes that anything would come to claim him. He now laments how he has become the strongest sword only to rust away all alone. Elsewhere, Fran's carriage is attacked and the slaves are ordered to sacrifice themselves so their owners can escape. Fran realizes that she is going to die, but the owners are all killed and she can now move freely. She refuses to die there and attempts to fight the ferocious beast. Her attack is useless, but she once again promises to become strong just as the sword calls out to her. The sword is able to use telepathy to communicate with the girl and explains that to her. Fran states that she is shocked, but in reality hardly shows any emotion. The sword demands that she pull him from the ground, and she manages to do so just before being attacked. The sword explains that she must equip him like her life depended on it, and she does, which allows a bunch of his high-level skills to be shared. Fran is able to fight easily now and shuts out all thoughts in order to defeat the beast. Their final attack is swift and Fran realizes that it was all thanks to the sword. He tells her not to put him back into the ground, but Fran fears he will only be taken from her by her owner. The owner approaches, retaking control of her collar, and demands she give him the sword. He reminds her of the contract she agreed to, but the sword nullifies it by breaking the owner's neck using telekinesis. The sword is free to move again and Fran is free of her collar. The sword wants her to be his wielder, but explains it will be very dangerous for her. Fran is certain though and explains that she needs to become stronger. She explains that black cats like her have never evolved. It was her parents' dreams to do so, and now she is determined to evolve herself. The sword likes her resolve and vows to help her accomplish her goal. The two formally introduce themselves, but the sword doesn't have a name. He allows Fran to name him, and she decides on teacher since he plans to help her learn to evolve. It is then explained that beast people take great pride in becoming stronger through evolution. Fran's parents took her on their journey to evolve, but they fell short as no black cat has ever evolved. Fran now sets out to fulfill their dream, and teacher explains that she actually has a knack for battle. With just a little bit of teaching, she is able to pick things up very quickly. More importantly though, she is very nice to teacher and he vows to help her achieve her goal. Fran senses something nearby and immediately goes to help people under attack. With teacher's help, Fran takes care of the goblins and he tells her never to reveal that he is the talking sword since she is the only one that can hear his telepathy. The guard named Randall offers to give them a ride into town, and it's clear to our pair that he really just wants her to protect him. On the way, Randall explains that some trouble on the Great Wolf Plain has monsters all riled up. He assumes stronger monsters fighting is what has caused the weaker ones to gather near roads. This is also the area where stories say that the S-rank monster Fenrir died. Randall compliments her on being able to take out the goblins and assumes she must be at least an E-rank adventurer. He explains that adventurers are given ranks from G to S, and the higher tier ones are very famous. All someone has to do is register at the Adventurers Guild. The guild will also buy goods earned from slaying monsters, and Fran becomes excited to earn some cash. However, someone in the carriage thinks about how it would be impossible for a black cat to ever become an adventurer. The next day, they finally arrive at Elisa, and some townspeople state how silly it is for such a small girl to be carrying such a large sword. Teacher notices all the swords but boasts about how none could compare to how strong he has gotten. However, a quick check with his analyze skills shows that they are all much stronger than him. Fran reassures him that he is still very special to her though, and the two head to the guild. At the guild, Nell the receptionist is having a bad day and thinks about how she wishes everyone would just die. She reminds herself to calm down and is met by Fran. Fran explains that she wants to become an adventurer, but Nell thinks about how a child wouldn't last 5 minutes and attempts to deny her. Nell states that she would have to fight their examiner in a mock battle and will have to risk injury. Fran persists though, so Nell determines that the child will have to learn a hard lesson and takes her to meet the examiner, Donadrand. Nell is surprised to see that Donadrand's intimidation skill that usually scares away the weak does not affect Fran at all. Teacher analyzes him to see that he is incredibly strong and has an attack power of 650. Donadrand explains that he never holds back, and teacher points out how this will be their toughest opponent yet. The test begins and Donadrand begins his assault. His attacks are forceful and relentless, so Fran can only manage to dodge. Fran refuses to just keep running away, and teacher puts a buff on her to improve her attack power. With improved strength and agility, Fran manages to cut Donadrand, but he states it won't be enough as he begins to heal. She badly wants to become an adventurer though, and teacher uses a combination of earth and fire spells to deal massive damage. Nell is amazed at how Fran is able to use multiple spells without an incantation, and Fran goes in for a final blow. It's a Dragon Fang attack that decisively ends the fight, and Nell is once again surprised to see that Fran built up one attack while also using other spells. She believes Fran must have 2 brains and points out how she has never seen even high-rank adventurers fight like that. Afterwards, the Guildmaster Klimt wonders how a 12-year-old is capable of such fighting prowess, but she refuses to tell. Teacher had told her to keep everything a secret since telling people might expose their weaknesses. Klimt attempts to use an identify skill to reveal her secret, but they have an identify protection skill. Klimt decides to let her become an adventurer and explains that spirits are able to identify any ill intentions someone may have, but they are calm at the moment. She is then asked to pick a class. Classes give different skills and abilities, and everyone is shocked to see all the classes she can choose from. Teacher wonders if he has shared too many skills with her, and she decides to pick the spellsword class. She is given her guild card, but they quickly realize they will need money for a room. Teacher tells her to pretend she is pulling from her item bag when she is really using the pocket dimension skill and releases several goods. They only sell the low and mid-rank materials though and decide to save the good stuff. This still results in them receiving a 195,000 gold payout. Some other adventurers then try to accuse her of doing underhanded things to earn the money since that is the only way a black cat could do it. They assume she must have made a shady deal with Nell, but Nell intervenes. She explains that Fran's materials were perfectly handled and properly butchered. That is the reason they earn so much more than everyone else. Nell wishes they would all just die and they attack her, but Fran stops them. Teacher explains that she shouldn't stab them inside the guild, but the dogman continues insulting Fran and his feet end up getting cut off. Teacher isn't even sure what happened, but Fran explains that she combined 2 skills to do it without even unsheathing Teacher. He is amazed by her progress and she uses a skill that does internal damage to finish the rest. Nell states that it was all in self-defense, and the two head out to buy some gear. However, as they leave, a man explains that his godsight skill sees through everything, and he can tell that she has an intelligent weapon. On their way to buy gear, teacher explains that Fran is an adventurer now and needs some good defensive equipment. Alisa is home to a highly skilled blacksmith, and a man states that she should visit his store for some armor. Analysis reveals that he is an honorary blacksmith, and teacher wonders if he is the one he heard of. They cautiously go with Garrus, and onlookers think about how much of a waste it would be for him to give her gear. Garrus explains that he witnessed her fight at the guild, and he only sells stuff to adventurers that he deems worthy. Fran then tries on some high quality gear that Garrus only charges 150,000 gold for. The items are discounted because they were commissioned by someone who failed to return from the dungeon. Teacher notices that everything there is stronger than him, but Fran reassures him once again. However, they are shocked when Garrus states that he knows she wields an intelligent weapon. He explains his godsight skill and points out how strong her sword is. Garrus can also tell that Teacher is able to speak telepathically, and Fran thinks that they can trust him. Teacher can't believe when Garrus states how strong of a sword he is, since there are several stronger swords in the shop. However, Garrus explains that there are more important things than attack power. He has Fran imbue Teacher with 100 mana, and they easily destroy a sword with much higher attack power. Garrus explains that Teacher's mana conductivity is A rank, which results in a 200% stat boost. If Fran were to imbue him with 1000 mana, then Teacher could achieve an attack stat well over 2000. Fran says she never doubted Teacher was powerful, and the two share a moment. Teacher explains that he doesn't know who created him, and Garrus states that it must have been a divine blacksmith. There are only 5 in existence, and Teacher begins to wonder if he is a legendary sword. Garrus points out that there aren't many of them, and he has only seen one before. Teacher then brings out some D and C rank materials, and Garrus says he can make Fran better gear with them. He accepts any leftover materials as payment, but explains it will take a month to make. Afterwards, another store owner brings them into her store, and has Fran pick out some normal clothes. Their last stop is to find some food and spices for their journey, and they head to the general store. The owner is a retired adventurer, and he allows them to look around. They find all they need to make some decent food and head to an inn for the night. It's just a normal room, but Fran explains that she has never been in such a comfortable room before. She is grateful for all the amazing things that have happened since meeting Teacher, and he promises to protect and look after her until the day she evolves. Later, Teacher uses the spices to make fried chicken, and Fran thinks it's delicious. They plan to begin questing the next day and have a strategy meeting. With their current level and equipment, Teacher believes they will need good recovery skills to take on higher level characters and monsters. The meeting is cut short though, as Fran falls asleep and dreams about becoming stronger with Teacher. The next day, the pair set out to gather herbs, and Teacher explains that G-rank adventurers get stuck with these mundane tasks. Teacher assumes that Fran is enjoying herself on the quest, but he is wrong. They hear fighting in the distance and investigate to find several goblins attacking a trio. Fran jumps into battle and points out how things are heating up. Teacher can't blame her for getting fired up, but Fran points out that she meant the forest is on fire. Teacher wants to use earth magic instead of fire now, and the two begin their fight against the goblins. They end the fight quickly, which amazes the trio, and Fran uses recovery magic for the first time to heal everyone. The group want Fran to loot the goblins, and they only now realize that the goblins are of a higher level than usual. One of the men thinks that's a precursor to a goblin stampede, and it is explained that that means there is a high chance that the Goblin King is around. An army of goblins led by a king has a threat level of D. However, the king and queen's offspring will all be hobgoblins. They all have the ability to level up, and their growth rate is alarmingly fast. Their threat level will become a C, and they will invade human territories in search of food. Just then, they realize one goblin was left and eliminate it, but determined that it was too late since it already called for backup. Fran tells everyone to leave, and when Teacher expresses concern, tells him that taking on a bunch of goblins will be good training. Their opponents are tougher than expected, but Fran credits her new armor for keeping her from being harmed. After defeating a few goblins, Fran reaches level 6. The fight becomes more difficult, but she eventually reaches level 8. Goblins continue to appear though, and Teacher believes that there are too many. It's clear that they are beginning to coordinate their attacks, and Teacher decides that they should retreat for the time being. Before they can escape, Fran is struck by an arrow, but she explains that she can still fight. Teacher is stunned by her determination, and she exclaims that she will never back down. Thanks for watching part 1. Future parts will be linked in a pinned comment below.